Podcast coming to you again from the Trend Micro offices high above Jersey City. I'm Casey, and as usual, I have with me Dan. Say hi, Dan.
Howdy.
And we actually have a newcomer today, Tom. Say hi, Tom.
Hi.
So we actually got a little feedback. Thank you for sending it in for those that did. But we're going to start today not just hitting our security topic right off the bat, but what we are going to do is take a little bit of time to talk about who we are, how we came to the business. And what we'll do is we'll do this every week with just our newcomers. So today you get all three of us, and then when you get our guests, we will do the same with them. So Dan, we're going to start with you. Who are you? Where did you come from? And how did you get here?
Yeah, thanks, Casey. I came from a technical operations background. So originally working at a startup and doing a lot of systems management, doing a lot of server upgrades, things of that nature. And then ended up managing endpoints, right, as the company grew. Moved on to a small subsidiary of Amazon called Audible.
Have you heard of Amazon?
Yeah, isn't that the company that ships out all those Christmas gifts that we have?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And records audiobooks,
Yeah.
One of the biggest audiobook distributors in the world. I was a systems engineer there, so managed all the internal systems, all of the business critical systems, things of that nature. So, yeah, that's me.
Cool. So Tom, our newcomer, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I'm based out of Michigan, and I started from the bottom. Now we're here type of story where I worked at a manufacturing company that was a tier 1 automotive parts seller. So I went from your help desk, your frontline support, all the way to infrastructure, then moved to security. So I learned everything from really pretty much triaging all the way to infrastructure, your hypervisors, VMware, ESXi, all the way to firewalls, so Palo, Cisco, and then journeyed into the security realm, learning about data governance, doing things with legal policies, data compliance, you name it. I was like the security janitor, if you want to call it that, where anything that had the word security in it, that was me.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Dan. So a little bit about me. I've been kicking around in this business for 20 some odd years. I've done work for both the vendor side as well as I was a consultant in one of the big 4 firms doing security work, as well as a mix of hardware and various other things here and there. But for the past 15 years of my life, it's been focused mostly on security, either consulting for, like I said, some of the largest firms in the world or doing it on the vendor side. So that's what you're going to get from me. Anyway, today, we don't have our bowl of security topics, but that's okay. Somebody had actually asked if we could chat about attack surface and management of it. What is it? And how do we control the utter sprawl that it's becoming? So let's, Tom, I think you got some strong, security hands-on background, right?
Yeah,
So,
a little bit. Got like probably about 16 years or so in the security space.
Yeah, you don't look that old.
No.
You're doing well.
It hasn't aged me quite yet.
I mean, you got this little poof hair coming up from the headphones.
Well, yeah, you told me to put the headphones on like
right,
this.
because you were wearing them improperly. We don't like that here. Anyway, so Tom, why don't you tell us what is an attack surface? What does that even mean when somebody mentions attack surfaces?
Well, when you start looking at the attack surface, you got to look at a couple different areas. I always say look at data, look at your internet-facing assets, look at the machines that you're managing, your internal or external machines, and then look at the people because they're your assets too because they're doing those day-to-day operations, they're handling the financial data, and they're handling all the critical pieces of your organization.
So everything is the attack surface.
Yeah, in my mind, yes, because it's everything that I mentioned. It's a key part of how your company makes money and how it flows day to day.
And what do you think, Dan?
Yeah, and in the new age, we're looking at multiple cloud accounts, right? That's one of the key things in my mind is that as organizations adopt these public cloud providers, they're starting to not just utilize one, right? Not just utilize 5 or 6. They're utilizing tens, hundreds, thousands of these accounts. So getting some insight into what's going on in those is another attack surface that's almost brand new to us.
It's funny to see the account guide go accounts, and it's funny to see the everything guy go everything, right?
Yeah.
Because it isn't just accounts.
Yeah.
Not to say you're wrong. You're partially right, but what Tom was saying is there's so much more to this, simply because you can't just focus on the actual underlying compute, I guess, right? I mean, even extending probably to the people within the organization. I imagine that they are one of the riskiest assets you have, whether you know it or not.
Oh, exactly. Well, if you look at your standard traditional IT infrastructure, as a sense, you have one team or one person that's managing the infrastructure, but now you have shadow IT that could be doing things like you have your DevOps engineers maybe on a different team. Now they can spin up AWS instances because they have just a credit card. It's hard to control that sprawl now, but now as a security professional, we have to start looking at all those different things to limit our exposure outside now. So that's the hard part about moving in such a fast rate of this digital era, and it's tough. It's tough to really look at it as a whole now because there's so much to really look at.
I was going to say, it's funny to hear you say the digital era because
I know.
as you get older and you hear this over and over and over again. Hey guys, we're in the digital era. We're in the digital era. I mean, it's the same thing that people have been saying.
Oh, I feel so old when I say it.
I mean, we're. I mean, it's true. We're rapidly accelerating, but what's that mean is we're just changing some of the approaches we're taking, but nothing's really changing at the end of the day.
No, you're still protecting assets. That's really the overall goal of this. It's just the playing field gets larger and larger. We started off in this little 4-square type of surface, but now we're in this football field type of area that we have to cover now. And we're one team, essentially almost some companies have just 1 or 2 people doing this.
Yeah. One thing that I can bring to the table for this one is, starting my career in the late 2010s. Yep. I told you guys you feel old now, right?
Kids these days,
I'm
right?
almost like yours. I'm almost there.
I had a server closet that I needed to manage. I had MDF rooms, and we made investments into physical hardware, right? And then in this 2 to 3 year gap, we ended up being able to utilize these cloud providers to spin up resources that we otherwise wouldn't, right? Like I wouldn't have access to a virtual machine instance before unless it ran it on my laptop, right? Now I can run them at scale.
So let me ask you this. How many mistakes have you made?
Countless.
With regard to even securing this stuff? Like raise your hand if you've done quad zeros in a security group. Yeah,
I have them out there now.
You at home, I'm sure everybody's raising their hand somewhere, right?
Make things work,
whether you admit it or not. Yeah, that's the balance, right? That is always the balance. I can make it work really easily and quickly, or I can do it properly, but it's going to make my job harder, which kind of gets back to the people aspect.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we have to look at when we look at that attack surface. A lot of the times, the path of least resistance is not the secure path, obviously. We need to get jobs done. We need to get the tasks done so that operations are going to keep moving. So having roles that might be a little bit more overly privileged, yeah, that happens on a day-to-day basis. And I know that you've done it, I've done it.
I still do it only because it's just easier. No production data in my count, folks.
Yeah.
So, but getting back to that people thing, and I had this conversation with somebody recently, and we discussed how in some organizations you can always tell who the worst users are going to be, and it ends up where it's the organizations where the focus or the organizational it's always the organizations where their key personnel, and I mean doctors, lawyers, right? They don't have a lot of time to manage themselves and the equipment that's put in front of them. And if you don't have your lawyer lawyering and you're a law firm, that's it. That's like your assembly line not running. You're not making money. So it's similar with doctors, right? It's a little bit different, but similar. But just picking on the lawyers because that's low-hanging fruit. If they're not lawyering, you're not making money. They know this. The firm knows this, and your core mission, job one, is to keep them happy and keep them running. So again, show of hands if you've ever weakened security for a lawyer because you just needed to get running, and that was the mission. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's not their focus. It's not their focus. Their focus is to complete their task, being a lawyer, being a doctor. But now, as security professionals, we have to kind of delicately balance that fine line of putting security in, but yet still having optimal performance.
Yeah, and my mind always goes to the organizations where the security professional is the one that also is, imaging laptops, imaging desktops, taking care of all the servers and all of the, essential applications, SaaS services that the organization is building. And then you add on that you need to manage this attack surface that you've built, while allowing lawyers to lawyer and allowing, CFOs and CEOs to do their job without stopping them from adding value to their role.
So on that point, and let's put all of the fancy tech, digital age stuff aside. So it starts with people. If I've got privileged users who working within my environment who are not savvy, or who sometimes even the savvy users are the most dangerous, right? Raise your hand if you've removed company anti-malware from your company laptop just because it makes your job easier. Sorry, legal.
Not saying that. Not saying anything like that.
Yeah.
So
Reset, yes, I've reset that, yeah.
Raising my hand, but not raising my hand right now.
So starting with people, how do you start to manage that human aspect or that human connection point? What are some things that we can do or look at, or where can we start to adapt our modern tools to stop them from hurting us unintentionally?
Well, you start looking, if they're remote, maybe adopt a zero trust model, because
Okay, so he said the buzzword, Dan. I mean, we really should get like a little buzzword buzzer, because we've got zero trust. So now you've said it. Now you need to define it.
Well, I guess the easiest way to define it is giving people what they need, not what they want. So limiting their access to applications. Lawyers don't need access to a database application. Your finance people might not need access to patient health history. It's like those are the different things that you have to really look out for. And then maybe adjust based on their risk score. Are they clicking on risky applications? Maybe they're doing things a little bit more riskier on their computers.
So you say risk score. What does that mean? What's a risk score? How are you coming up with a person's risk?
Well, the risk score, it's just like you walking on the side of the street. Like, are you walking on the sidewalk? Are you walking in the middle of the road? Like, it's the inherited actions that you're doing that, as let's say as security professionals, we have to kind of monitor and measure. Like, are you clicking on phishing emails? Well, that's going to increase your risk. Are you not using MFA? That's going to increase your risk. And when you start adopting that type of profiling on your users, then you're able to mitigate or remediate certain things based on that. Oh, I see them clicking on things. They're logging on to their account, maybe from a unknown location. Maybe let's put some gates in there. Let's try to reduce that down by putting in policies like MFA, or maybe blocking them if they're logging in from, let's say, the office in Jersey City here, but 10 minutes later they logged in from Dallas or San Francisco or Japan. Obviously, that's not going to work. That doesn't happen.
Impossible travel.
Yeah, exactly. It's impossible travel.
I mean, we all wish we could get to Japan in 10 minutes from New York City, but I happen to know it's an 18-hour flight. So, okay. So we control our users, or we assign risk. I love the analogy, by the way, being on the sidewalk versus the street. But I happen to know there's a problem there, because you and I were on the sidewalk last night, and we almost got run over by a car driving around another vehicle. So.
Well, I always call that like the drive-by download. So you have to still watch out, because there's still things that are looking to attack you.
Okay, so not perfect, just monitoring the users then.
Yeah. No, it expands even further. Obviously, you can monitor your users, but let's say, for instance, that car is like a machine that's that's running rogue, that's maybe a worm of some sort. You have to look at those machines. You have to look at, again, the attack surface of all the different things that are out there that you as security professionals, maybe you have configured something just because you needed to do it right then and there, the quad zeros, maybe overprivileged accounts or something like that.
Yeah, and obviously with that, there's users, but more importantly, especially coming from an operations background, there are machines that are tied to all those users and services, right?
Oh yeah.
So how do we manage that? How do we take a look at all of those servers? I remember specifically a time where I had an Excel spreadsheet of each server in a server room at all the different geographic locations of our offices, right? It was one Excel sheet, and it wasn't saved in OneDrive. It was like on my thumb drive that I'd put into a machine, save it there, put that in a lockbox somewhere, and then I had it on my local machine. And I'd go through and do things like Patch Tuesdays, where I'd go in and break out the server list in our Rochester office, our Connecticut office, our West Coast office, and then that was my inventory, right? That's how I knew what machines did what. And that was the only. I brought up another hot topic: inventory, right? Inventorying those assets, inventorying those computers, because being able to know what these machines do, what privileges they have, what their network configurations are, that was all in an Excel spreadsheet, and that's not really. Some organizations can still do it, but most cannot at the scales that they're growing to.
I'm throwing fuel in the fire here. What happened when you maybe imaged another machine, or another machine was brought in or purchased? Like, what did you do for that? How did you update that spreadsheet? You just have to go back and do it again.
Well, it was easy at a startup level because there were 3 people, right? And one of us would take the delivery of the asset, and usually, and I'm not exaggerating here, like plug it in our office and then image it, configure it, and then ship it out to the data center that we needed to rack and stack these machines into, and that was the process, right? Then you add it to Excel spreadsheet, and that's it. But when you're an enterprise, and that's one thing I've learned working at Trend, is that enterprises can't scale that way. Once you get to the volume of users, the volume of machines, if you're running an application, the bandwidth that it requires, it's not sustainable, and it's easy, like you're kind of hinting at, to kind of get lost, right? Oh, I bought a machine, or I spun up an EC2 instance. It got configured somehow, and I don't know where it went.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what I'm seeing too. When I was on the customer side, it's like I didn't know half the machines that came into the network, because either our production department had bought a machine or a piece of machinery that was connected to the network. Maybe my DevOps engineers were spinning up EC2 instances. I couldn't control that. It was already hard for me to scale up with the things that I was already managing, let alone now I have to watch out for all these other different departments.
Right.
So now we've got people, we've got machines you know about, machines you don't know about, which somehow you have to find a way to know about, because if they don't exist on Dan's spreadsheet on his thumb drive, they don't exist.
No.
And this is probably for one of the largest companies in the world.
I'll clarify, that was not my second employer. That was the startup organization.
That's probably music to a lot of people's ears.
Yes, please don't think that.
But so we're starting to sprawl, right? So what other components fit into the attack surface? Is that just it? Do I just have people? Do I just have machines? And then I'm done? I put them in a box?
Well, I think we're missing one key piece, and it's a big piece that attackers love to encrypt and steal or exfiltrate. You look at data. Like, data's now become the new oil, if you want to call it that, where they're not just...
I prefer the new electricity, but oil, that works.
Coming from the Tesla owner.
Yeah. Well, we're not at that stage yet. But
thanks for doxing me, though, Dan. I appreciate that.
If you see a Tesla right around the Northeast, you can think maybe it's Casey.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're not ransoming products that maybe your company produces. They're ransoming the data. Like, when you start looking at that, like, a company can just... You have schematics, you have code, you have financial data, HIPAA data. Like, you look at all those different things, and that's that now is becoming a big target because it's all over the place. There's misconfigurations in your cloud assets, misconfigurations in your machines, and now it's become a multi-billion-dollar industry for ransomware now. So that's
Yeah, it was actually $1.2 billion last year in payments alone that at least were reported to FinCEN.
yeah.
Right?
Just think of the ones that aren't reported.
Right. In fact, do you guys know 75% of all those payments, do you know where they went? The ones that were reported to FinCEN.
No.
Russia. So now you have to ask, if I'm not securing my assets properly and then I end up paying a ransom, what exactly is that ransom going to fund? Bad things.
Yeah, that's a good question. Or that's good.
That's a good point. Yeah, yeah, something to think about. And obviously now we're getting into, don't pay the ransom, things like that. So
Yeah, well, that's...
not to go down that rabbit
Yeah,
hole.
well, you shouldn't have to pay a ransom if you can do it properly, right?
That's right.
All right, so I've got users, I've got machines, I've got data. What else are we missing?
Well, what's hanging out? What's hanging out on the internet? You look at web applications that are configured to provide a service for your employees. Maybe it's a Jira instance. Maybe it's WordPress sitting somewhere that's a marketing website or something like that. Now, who's managing those things? Now, does the security professional have to manage that? Does the network admin have to manage that? Like, are they opening up ports that they shouldn't be? Are they updating WordPress or Jira at a good basis?
Or anything.
Yeah.
Anything.
Yeah. So now it's that again. Sorry, that
No,
digital era.
Yeah, so this becomes an extreme problem at scale, right? Because if I'm Dan's first startup company and I've got Dan running around managing our assets, maybe we have a WordPress app, maybe we have Jira. That's not that. Listen, there are big things to handle for everybody at scale, but there are big things to handle for any company. Everybody scales appropriately. Well, except in security, where we have massive organizations and one poor, tired, overworked SOC analyst. But shout out to my SOC analysts out there.
It's all the hats, that we have to wear.
Yeah,
network
absolutely.
admins become security admins.
So
infrastructure people become security admins.
But
yeah,
but it doesn't seem like this is going to scale evenly, because as I grow, I get more people, I get more machines, I get more data, I get more web apps, whatever. And then I have more people who are creating more things that I might not even know about. And it seems that problem is just exponential, where it just spirals more and more and more.
Yeah, this can't become a manual process.
Okay. So if it's not manual, sorry, Dan, in your thumb drive, how do we put Humpty Dumpty back together? How do we keep him together?
Well, you have to continually start looking at all these things. Like like I said, with the whole internet assets, machines, and people, you have to keep continually looking at it.
Okay, fine. That's a lip service answer.
Well,
right?
yeah, sure.
But how do you possibly? So I've got users, machines, data, web apps. Where am I pulling all of this together? Is it separate things I have to look at? Are there separate teams? It seems like a lot. And knowing what I know about the software landscape, frankly, it seems like I've got a user agent, I've got machine agents, I probably got firewalls in there, I probably have network sensors in there, I've got DLP for my data, I've got something else to look at my web apps, I've got something to control, files and who's putting what. I have to watch those security groups, right? This is a lot. How do I fit this together?
There was a dream I had when I was doing this thumb drive Excel work. And then we were starting to use Kibana and things of that nature, right? So that we could do something called automating, right? So, okay, now I don't have to worry about my Excel document. I can inventory my servers, know what all of them do, and then monitor their health, right? And once I started doing that, it became a thought process of, well, now that I can inventory all these servers, what else can we do with this, right? So one of the key pieces in my mind with that big kind of a puzzle, right? We have a bunch of different puzzle pieces scattered all over the place, is using some kind of tooling around automation to pull all those data sources into a single place, right? And that's what I think Tom's expertise is in.
So with my day-to-day at Trend, I am a specialist in our platform called Vision One.
Which we talked about last episode, if everybody watched and remembers.
Right.
So I gravitated towards that product because these were issues that I was having on the customer side. How do I effectively manage my attack surface? How do I look at my machines? What about my users, or all those different things that are connected to the web, and it aggregates it into a nice single dashboard that I can easily look at all those different things and help automate kind of that scanning or that continual risk monitoring.
So take us through those topics we touched on, right? So starting with users to machines to data to web apps. How do you control it, or how does the platform integrate those different parts of the attack surface?
So if you start looking at the people piece, maybe you're using Okta or Office 365, we can integrate into that. We pull data into there. If you look at...
So now we know who our people are.
Yep.
Which for the most part, right, I know we mentioned, like shadow IT or machines you don't see, but typically you're not hiring people that and giving them credentialed access without them being in these systems. So at the very least, we know who should be on the network, right?
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
And then we start looking at all the different machines. Obviously, we're seeing, and we can also see machine data from all that event telemetry that we're collecting. So now I can proactively start patching different things, maybe looking at how machines are interacting with each other. We look at data too, so we can integrate into Office 365. So maybe you're using OneDrive or SharePoint, and now we can see,
Or email.
Yeah, or email itself. So now we can start seeing maybe forwarding rules or permissions being shared, or how people are just logging in general.
So when you say how people are logging in, so we touched on impossible travel, we touched on risky users. Obviously, we cover that too.
Yep, and it does report on all those other things too, like MFA, if they have MFA enabled, maybe strong passwords, all those different things that roll into the security realm. And then you start looking at internet assets. We can do that too. If you have a domain, cool, we'll scan it, and then now you have a nice, again, unified dashboard that shows all those different things. It gives you a nice risk score. Again, not just on your assets, now your machines, now your users, and then you can apply those risk scores to maybe a little bit like what we said before, like a zero trust model, where when a risk score gets a little too high, maybe you want to cut off internal access or cut off cloud access. You don't want them to connect to the internet or your internal networks.
So totally
altogether.
isolate the user.
Yeah, totally isolate the user and the machine. So lots of different controls there. And again, this was something that I was really striving for when I was on the customer side. I had all these dashboards, like this dashboard for users, this dashboard for my assets, this dashboard for my data, and it's like I don't have time to aggregate and correlate all that data together. And where Vision One, this is the security admin Tom here. Vision One really would have helped me with being more efficient at my job, being able to put out those fires a little bit more quickly when they're just little embers and not just this big forest fire. And I can actually start working on different projects to help further the security efficiency of my own company.
And Tom, one of the things that I noticed poking around in Vision One as well is if, we have a tool for our cloud operations folks that basically can inventory the cloud assets, make sure there's no misconfigurations, right? But when we hook that into Vision One, they also get that in the scope of those risk scores and the threat landscape. Right?
Oh yeah. I just hooked it up in my in my dashboard.
We might as well just say the name of it.
Conformity.
Okay.
Yep. So yeah, I can see misconfigurations. I can see if I'm using accounts that are root accounts, and I can see all those different things. So my cloud builders that were originally infrastructure, like pure infrastructure builders, they might not be as effective in the cloud because there's a lot to consider. And now I have visibility in that. So that's like so much stuff that I like. There's so much stuff.
A tool that was originally meant to help those cloud ops folks can now be leveraged by those SOC folks, right?
Yep, exactly.
Cool. So Mark is frantically waving that we're out of both battery and storage space.
Sorry, Mark.
Yeah, sorry, Mark. Not really.
Not sorry.
No. So, listen. At the end of the day, risk is everywhere. That's never changed. It doesn't matter which digital age we're entering. the risk is always there. It
Oh,
just
yeah.
really depends on how you define it, right? And then how you manage it and what's acceptable to you. And everybody's going to be different. So, but most important in all of that is whether you're an organization of 10 or 10,000, automation, especially as you grow, is probably going to be, our brave new world here moving forward, because there's just so much new stuff coming at us so fast, and that's actually what's really changed, isn't it?
Oh,
Is,
yeah.
is that it's not so much that there's new technology. There's always been new technology, but we are iterating and changing and adapting so quickly now because these tools are building upon each other that's what's really making it very hard for teams to keep up, right? I mean, you talk about that little sound company that you worked for the much bigger company, right?
Mm-hmm.
We were just at reInvent,
Mm-hmm.
and just the scale of things that get announced there, and not to mention the rest of the year, it's constant. So if you're not keeping up, you're falling behind, obviously. And then the only way to stay in the game is that automation piece. And I think I can speak for Tom and myself, where the third thing we learned is that we're going to make Dan sit on his hands for the next podcast, because
He's a hummingbird. He loves to move.
we're going to edit around it, but he has knocked his microphone off the table at least 3 times.
Yep.
Hey, what can I say?
Okay.
This is an exciting conversation.
Well, I'll tell you what. So that's going to wrap us up for today. For Trend Micro, I'm Casey.
I'm Tom.
I'm Dan.
Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you out there.